She was a hit maker, record breaker, and all-around icon. Everyone in the world knows Whitney Houston, but they don't know everything about her. Long before she was the voice, Whitney Houston was rubbing shoulders with some of the most influential female vocalists around. As a child, Whitney sang at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, where the musical director was a successful R&B and gospel singer and her mother, Cissy Houston. Cissy got her start with the groups The Gospelaires and the Sweet Inspirations before moving on to a Grammy Award-winning solo career. Whitney's cousin was another famous member of the New Hope Choir, music icon Dionne Warwick. The Houstons had a few very famous family friends, in fact. As a child, Whitney also met Aretha Franklin, and her godmother was Darlene Love, the voice behind multiple 60s soul pop girl groups like The Blossoms and The Crystals. Houston's first real breakthrough came in 1980 when she was discovered at New York's iconic Carnegie Hall, but it wasn't for what you might think. Houston wasn't performing there. The 16-year-old was attending an event, and a representative of the Click model management agency noticed her. Houston's mother had kept her from signing a record deal at 14, urging her to continue with school. But this time, the move was allowed, and Houston entered into the world of professional modeling. In addition to gracing sewing pattern packages, Houston was featured in many leading women's magazines of the era. She appeared on the cover of 17's November 1981 issue, making history as one of the first black women to be featured.
This is Rudy's father. Well, how is the weather in Ireland?
In the early 80s, Bill Cosby was casting for The Cosby Show. At the time, Houston wanted to be an actor, and she auditioned, winning the role of second oldest daughter and teenage hipster Denise Huxtable. But when it came time to sign a contract for 5 seasons of the sitcom, Houston had a sudden change of heart. Jay Sandrich, who directed 100 episodes of The Cosby Show, told the Television Academy Foundation, "This girl that we brought back from New York said to me, 'I can't sign this contract,' and I said, 'Why?' She said, 'Well, I want to be a singer.'" Houston figured that starring on a weekly sitcom would pull her from her music, and she hadn't even landed a record deal yet. In 1983, Houston sang with her mother at Sweetwater's, a nightclub in New York City. Arista Records founder and president Clive Davis was in attendance, and he liked what he saw. He signed her on the spot, but rather than rush to get an album written, recorded, and released, Davis opted to move much more slowly. He booked her to sing Home from the Broadway musical The Wiz on The Merv Griffin Show in 1983, and landed her guest star gigs on Gimme a Break and As the World Turns. Houston finally debuted her first single in 1984, duetting with soul star Teddy Pendergrass on the R&B hit Hold Me. Despite that early success, her first album didn't come out for another year. The self-titled Whitney Houston finally launched in 1985. The wait was worth it. The album included 3 consecutive #1 hits.
It's a lot of work, but when you love it, it feels good.
Houston's star was on the rise, but she came close to losing it all. She had come up in gospel and R&B, historically black musical forms, but her first 2 albums, 1985's Whitney Houston and 1987's Whitney, weren't loaded with what she was known for. Instead, they contained crisply produced ballads made for the adult contemporary market. Some fans decided that Houston had turned her back on the black culture that had helped her succeed, and they made their feelings known during the 1988 Soul Train Awards. When Anita Baker read off the nominees for Best Music Video, the crowd screamed and clapped with delight for all of the nominees, except Houston. And when I Wanna Dance with Somebody was announced as the winner, there were boos. In 1991, Houston appeared on the Arsenio Hall Show and addressed criticism of singing too white.
I do sing the way God intended for me to sing, and I'm using what He gave me, and I'm using it to the best of my ability.
Houston wasn't just famous, she shattered world records. She's featured in the Guinness World Records as the most individually awarded female artist ever, winning more than 400 honors, including 6 Grammys. Between 1985 and 1988, Houston released 6 singles back-to-back that all hit #1 in the US, a record for consecutive chart toppers. She's also the only act to ever release 8 straight multi-million selling albums, which include some of the most bought LPs from individual genres. Her soundtrack to the movie The Preacher's Wife is the best-selling gospel album in American history, while the Houston-dominant companion to The Bodyguard is the top-selling movie soundtrack. Houston sold more copies of that album's hit song, I Will Always Love You, than any other female artist. In 2001, Arista Records signed Houston to a $100 million recording contract, the most lucrative ever at that point in musical history. More than a decade after her death, Houston and her music remain quite popular. She was Forbes' highest-grossing deceased celebrity in 2023, with her estate earning around $30 million in 1 year. Over the span of her career, Houston took 11 singles to the #1 spot on the American pop chart, but she might have accomplished even more. In 1987, she turned down an opportunity to perform with Michael Jackson in a song that went on to become a huge hit. When Jackson was prepping Bad, the follow-up to his monster blockbuster Thriller, he wanted a big name to be his duet partner on what would be the record's lead-off single, I Just Can't Stop Loving You. Barbra Streisand said no. And Houston? She was barred from even participating. Clive Davis thought it would overexpose her when she was about to release her own new album, and that Jackson's Epic Records wouldn't pay enough for Houston's services. In the late 80s, Houston lost out on another opportunity. Prolific hit songwriter Diane Warren wrote the song Love Will Lead You Back with Houston in mind, but Davis once again had other ideas. When Warren played her demo for Davis, he wanted it not for Houston, but for Arista artist Taylor Dayne. That recording became the only #1 hit of Dayne's career. For decades, Houston was one half of a high-profile celebrity relationship. In 1989, the mega-famous singer met R&B star Bobby Brown at the Soul Train Awards. She tried flirting, but he wasn't interested, until they reconnected at her birthday party and later a concert. The couple wound up getting married in July 1992, but the relationship proved tumultuous. They fought on their honeymoon, and Houston later told Oprah that Brown abused her. Both also admitted to using drugs. They filed for divorce in 2006.
We fought hard, we loved hard.
But back when Houston first started seeing Brown, she was entangled with another famous man, Eddie Murphy. Houston's friend Robin Crawford wrote in A Song for You, My Life with Whitney Houston, she was more interested in Eddie Murphy, but he was elusive. In fact, Murphy stood Houston up on a date they had planned, which reportedly devastated her. They'd long since parted ways by the time Houston got serious with Brown, but Crawford claims Murphy phoned Houston the morning of her wedding to tell her she was making a mistake. In 1991, Houston had a different kind of hit. It was a song many had heard before, but not in the way that she sang it. Before the start of the Super Bowl, Houston performed the Star-Spangled Banner. Houston worked with her musical director Ricky Minor and arranger John Clayton Jr. to create a fresh take on the song, inspired by Marvin Gaye's soul-infused version performed at the 1983 NBA All-Star Game.
It's hard to top that emotion and that performance.
Both the NFL and CBS were hesitant about such a radically different national anthem, but their minds were quickly changed. According to Minor, Houston hadn't even heard the arrangement until she sang it for the pre-record.
That was one take. Primarily one take. She hadn't studied.
The version that went out across Tampa Stadium and the airwaves was a mix of the recorded version and Houston singing live. The rapturous reception led Arista Records to release it as a single, and Gulf War-related patriotism fueled the song's rise to #20 on the Billboard Hot 100, a first for the familiar song. After close to a decade of chart-topping musical success, Houston decided to try her hand on the silver screen, landing a role opposite Kevin Costner in the romantic thriller The Bodyguard as a pop star in danger. The 1992 film earned $411 million at the global box office, such a blockbuster that Hollywood set about turning Houston into a proper movie star. She'd ultimately only star in 4 big-screen projects, but there were other movies planned that failed to happen. In 1993, pre-production began on a remake of A Star is Born to feature Houston as a musical up-and-comer who falls in love with her mentor, an established star set to be played by Denzel Washington or Wesley Snipes. Houston's managers turned down the initial screenplay because it contained too many curse words. It never got made, nor did a movie about a singer and songwriter falling in love called Serenade, or a drama about a young singer who becomes a star in New York City, or a project about a gospel singer in a little town. Houston adapted Steve Winwood's 1986 pop rock hit Higher Love for inclusion on her 3rd album, but its release didn't go as planned. When the track was sent to Clive Davis for approval, he axed it. Davis later told Rolling Stone that he didn't want Houston to be a cover artist at the time. For nearly 3 decades, Houston's version of Higher Love was hard to come by. It was included as a bonus track on I'm Your Baby Tonight in Japan only. In 2019, Houston's sister-in-law and estate executor Pat Houston decided that the time was right to finally formally release Higher Love. But rather than just release the 1990 recording as it was, the estate and Arista successor RCA Records commissioned producer and remixer Kygo to do something with Houston's vocals. The result was a synths and horns-heavy dance pop version showcasing Houston's voice, which landed on multiple Billboard charts 7 years after her death, giving the singer one final posthumous hit.